Hey everybody, Matthew Turner here, ROTL Lions UK, just sorting ourselves out here. Steve just about to come in as well. Hope you're all well, hope you're doing good as we await Nick to come in just a few moments' time, I hope. Bear with us and we will be right with you. Why is that? There we go. That's better. Hang on. Can you hear me, Steve?
I like a little name tag.
Yeah, so that's a free app on Zoom. I don't know whether I can put your name on it as well. Hang on.
I'd like one.
I'll see what I can do. Give me a sec. Let's have a look. I only see mine. I don't know whether... So the app in Zoom is called Overlays, if you can see that.
Oh yeah, apps.
Yeah, so...
Zoom. Zoom apps is only available on a Mac OS version, High Sierra and above. Please upgrade your Mac OS.
Oh, well, that sucks. Hey, Nick, how you doing?
How are we doing? Good. How are you guys?
Yeah, not too bad. We're streaming now, but we don't record our audio bit until
no problem.
later.
No
so
problem.
don't say anything too bad.
No problem. Thanks for the heads up.
That was cool. How's things?
Good. Just busy time of year, of course. We're I guess what 3 weeks away now, something like that. So
yeah, 3 weeks today would be
3
day
weeks
one.
away. Yeah, that's right.
It's one of those things you see so many people, and I kind of agree with it. It's like, oh, I wish it was just here because it's a kind of a bit of a grind, and then it's like,
Right.
Oh my god, what are we going to do for the next 3 months afterwards?
I know, right? And then after that, yeah, you're like, okay, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
We've got OTAs coming.
Yeah, not as exciting. As exciting. Yeah.
Just to say to our live audience, if you've got any questions that occurred during the show, let me know at me at Roar the Lions, and then I'll actually see it because we've got a load of questions I'm going to get to here. So do that, get it in there. We've finally monetized for the first time in 2 years. We finally made it. So if you want to throw a super chat our way, I definitely will see that. Twitch guys as well, you know what to do. Nick, don't know how long you have because we didn't discuss that, so I don't know if you have a.
However long you guys need. Let's go.
Sure.
Yeah,
All
let's
right.
talk.
Steve, are you really sure you want to ask that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
What do we got?
Oh,
I'm surprised, Nick. I've got a little bear trap.
Okay.
10 minutes in for
okay.
you.
Nick, I'll give you a hint. It would have been
All
more.
right.
It would have been more awkward last week to ask this question when we had Dave Burkett on the show.
Right. Okay. Why? Well, I'm curious now.
I wanted to ask you about Carlos's article this week.
Oh no, I
don't know
didn't
if
read
you-
what he wrote. What did he write? I haven't
well-
read it. I'm sorry, Carlos. I've been busy. I like Carlos, but I haven't read it.
Okay, so think about the reality as we know it, and then think about what Carlos would write.
Right. Did he write that things were going badly? Did he write that things were
Pretty much.
I think
how? How did he write that?
I'll when we get to that segment, I'll read out a couple of quotes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
we'll go over those.
I think I can see the route to it though. Like it's
Carlos is itching, man. That means things are going well. Hey, look, if Carlos he's digging for things because he's like things are too nice around here. That's sometimes that happens. That's interesting.
Ooh, interesting question. Just come in. I'll just pop that in before we start because otherwise I'll get confused. Cheers, Mike. All right, here we go. Ready?
All good.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to a special edition of the Roar of the Lions UK podcast. My name is Matthew Turner alongside Stephen Collins, and with us we have a very special guest, the return of Nick Baumgardner, co-host of One of These Years from The Athletic. Nick, it's been some time. How you doing?
Yeah, what's going on, guys? How are you?
Yeah, not too bad.
All good.
Yeah, it's a
Good.
busy time of year
Draft
for me.
season, right?
Yeah, oh god, it's so
Yeah.
good. I love it. Just want to get one thing off our chest to start with. We have 1 day left of our giveaway. So if you're listening to this now, I'll make sure it's uploaded before it finishes. But you can win a Len Barney mini signed helmet on there. You can get a Calvin Johnson rookie card on there. Or you can get Barry Sanders graded card. It's free to enter. Link in the description below. just do it. It doesn't cost you a penny. All right, let's get on with this. And just to start off, Nick, I just want to take you back to the 2022 season and just discuss how you thought it all went. I mean, it was all going to pot for a while, and you know, there was a vote of confidence from the owner, which is never a good sign.
Never good.
No,
never good.
And then we started winning games, and
yeah.
I mean, I guess when it comes down to it, do you think that are we the team of the first 7 games? Are we the team of the last 10? Are we somewhere in between?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's more of the last 10, but it's probably more in like the middle of that than people are probably willing to, you know, admit to themselves, because they did get on a little bit of a run there. I mean, they had some things go their way. You know, they had some losses in there, and that's why they didn't get in. But I think by and large, it was a very productive season. And it was like, for me, when it ended, I kept saying on our show, like, I was just really glad for them that they stuck to their plan and their process, and it worked, because I thought, and you guys know this, like when they were 1-6 and everybody, like the vote of confidence or whatever, when everybody was like, oh my God, what are we doing? And then they traded Hawkinson. And I'm like, look, if you look at that move just on its own, what it is, that was I thought that was a great move. And what it allowed them to do moving forward sort of opened things up for other people. One thing leads to another, and then everything sort of takes off. And they stuck to their process. They never panicked. They never bailed on anything, you know. And that was the coolest part, I thought, that, you know, 2 years into a really tough rebuild, they stuck to their guns pretty much every time. And it's pretty much worked out almost without exception here so far.
Just taking you back to that point, that 1-6 point just before the Green Bay game, obviously, like, we're a bit of a distance, but from your perspective, how did it feel at 1-6? Like, were you kind of always were you always like, this is going to turn, just waiting for the game? Or was there a point when you yourself were like thinking, this could get overpassed?
Well, even further to that, did it get to the point where you had pre-written a Dan Campbell get sacked article? Because
never there.
No,
never there. I never did that. That was never to that point, because no. And I think that it wasn't surprise. It was awkward. You know what I mean? But like, to Steve's point, like, yeah, I kind of did wonder. I was, for the most part, like, this is going to turn and they're going to be better than people realized. And that's what I thought. I thought they were going to be like a 6-win, something like that. You know, it's going to turn. They're going to win some games at the end of the year, and you'll see where they're at. And you'll have I kept saying, people have a better idea of where they're going when the year ends than they do at 1-6 right now. Because this is a lie, basically. I'm like, this is not who they are. However, there was a little bit of that creeping in, because when you're here and you're in Detroit and you're around it, man, like, and that's when the true negative stuff comes up. And it was, I remember a year ago, and I feel like this got them into a funk too, the first season, when someone asked them along the way, are you worried that you're not going to win a game? And it was like the 4th or 5th week. And I was like, oh God, why are you asking that? And then I feel like it got into their head, you know, like, little things like that around here happen. And so I did have a couple of, like, the Green Bay game. I was like, they need to get this one. When I remember talking to Colton, when I was like, this needs to be a win. It can be a win, and it needs to be, you know, a good day. And it was. And that was one of those, that was an interesting day for sure, I'll say.
Yeah, we kind of stamped it twice against them with statement victories, which was great. Our thanks to Giovanni Lyons for our first ever super chat, by the way. Thank you, Gio. That's great. And to Dan for subscribing at Tier 1 on Twitch. Appreciate you guys. Let's talk about the progression of Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes from then up till now. I mean, obviously, you said, you know, they're stuck to their guns. They believed in what they were doing. They didn't deviate in their course, but do you think they're getting better in what they're doing as well? I'm not sure whether that really played a part, or whether they kind of just regressed to the mean a little bit as well. Right. But do you think that they're improving in their skills? Because it's kind of hard to judge, but you're there.
Yeah, I definitely think Holmes is. And I think that, you know, when he's confident in himself, and he, like, you know, is full of confidence and is not worried. And I think he, like anybody, there have been times I feel like some things have happened that were just way off. You just out of left field. You never saw him coming. And I wouldn't say panic or whatever has ever entered the fray, but like, you could tell where maybe there was a couple times they made decisions that were like, I don't know if that's quite what you wanted to do, maybe, but you had to do it. But for the most part, I think when you look at everything they do, and then you look at what they've done this offseason and sort of how it's led to this, it's like, man, like, the Jamal Williams thing, how they were able to move off of him with the plan to have Montgomery when clearly Jamal's agent did not expect that to happen. That was one of the savviest moves of the entire free agency period, I thought. And like 2 or 3 years ago, people were like, can this guy do anything other than like scout? Like, you know, like people were like, we know he can scout, but can he really make moves? Can he make trades? Can he, you know, and he's proven a few times now. So he definitely has. Absolutely. Campbell, I think, has too, but like, I think there's still more questions with him. And, you know, I definitely think that the process that he's been able to get these guys to buy in and keep them bought in has been aided by his consistency more than anything else. So I think that he certainly has improved, but I think that like some of the in-game decisions, you know, in big moments, I guess we'll see. And I think that that'll be the real test when it comes down to it.
I definitely think from a PR point of view, if you'd have said to us around game 16, 17 that Jamal Williams wouldn't be there by, you know, like the end of February, that would have been an absolute landmine. But I mean, it seemed to be handled really slickly, and you know, they had someone else in place. They moved quickly. There wasn't much fallout, even when Jamal like said, you know, like a few sort of semi-negative things.
Right.
It just seemed to be handled really well.
It really was, and I think that I kept saying to people here, like, and I actually said to somebody inside the building, I was like, you know, 10 years ago, maybe not even, and you know, in any other era, the Lions would have overpaid for Jamal. They would have bent to whatever he was asking for, and he was asking for too much. He was asking for essentially, I think, a little bit around what Montgomery got, which is not what he's going to get. And we saw in the market he did not get that. So he was asking for a discount, more or less, like in his favor. And I, you know, like you just mentioned it, Steve, like 10 years ago, from a PR standpoint, they would have cared about a PR thing too much, and it would have impacted their, you know, roster decisions. This was a classic example of beating them to the punch, I think, almost, because you were saying, look, we're not going to get into a hornet's nest with Jamal. We already have a backup plan. If you turn us down, we're already moving on, and we're going to have a guy in here by the end of the day, and this is going to be over. And like that, when I saw that happen, I was like, man, this guy Holmes is pretty good. Like that was a smooth move, I thought.
And do you think some of that has rubbed off on the locker room as well? Because probably if that had happened during the Patricia era, there'd have then been immediately 2 or 3 tweets from various players that would be raking over for the next week, and it would have kind of snowballed. But it kind of just felt that it was really contained, and we moved on really quickly.
I think they did such a good job earlier in free agency of signing like culture guys like Isaiah Buggs and Will Harris, and guys that we don't think about necessarily as stars, or guys that maybe won't even be like long-term, you know, plans here. Anzalone, they probably overpaid for him, but the locker room presence of those guys, I think, helped them find the confidence of being like, the room will be fine. We'll be okay. There'll probably be a couple people in here that were upset. I'll promise you there were people in there that were a little shook when they saw, oh God, you know, he's leaving. Like what, you know, like what's up with that? Like we thought, you know, he was their guy. That was the first guy that bought in, you know, and there really was. Jamal was brought here to help the culture, and he did, and he left it a much better place than he found it. And, you know, he swung his shot to get paid, but sadly or not sadly, I kind of think that's Jamal Williams' role as a football player. Like that's what he's going to go do in New Orleans now. He's going to go help them build their culture, and I promise you in 3 years, he will leave that place better than he found it. Like that's just what Jamal does. But David Montgomery's the same type of player, but a little bit better and younger. So like, I don't hate that at all. And a good guy. So it works out just the same.
I found it quite interesting how Holmes was selling it, because it seemed very much like Jamal was the number one option. They extended the offer to him. That was rejected. And I think he was selling that they were surprised that the offer was rejected and then moved on to the backup option. But the way he talks about Montgomery, they were talking to him already, but they were out of his market as well. They didn't think they could get him at the value they could. And it was kind of the confluence of both coming together as, we can't get Jamal at this price, but we can get David at this price at the same time. But I think it speaks to maybe a bigger thing of what they're doing, which maybe didn't happen in the Patricia era, which is, I think this hints at how the whole operation is happening. They're probably on the phone to 100 free agents all at once in multiple positions, always with a backup option not ready to go, because you've still got to work out the money, and it never, you know,
hypothetically though,
David didn't have to take $6 million, and maybe in this market he's getting a good deal actually, because running backs aren't getting paid, but he could easily have done the same as Jamal and waited for more. So they're just very, very active at keeping in touch with the agents. Gardner
100%.
Johnson was exactly the same. What's your
Same
asking
thing.
price? You're still in the market. Is it coming down? The amount of work they're doing behind the scenes is exceptional.
Yeah. I mean, it's been like that with, I mean, almost every, you go back through the draft picks and some of the guys that they've hit on, they've been able to, like Kirby Joseph. I just did a little video on him. Like he's a great example of full scale scouting. He was a guy that a year ago, a lot of people had a 5th round grade on him because wasn't that fast. The speed numbers weren't exactly overwhelming. I think he really only started maybe 1 year at Illinois. There's a lot of little things that you could pick and find. And he's a safety and all this. But like, look at him. Like they got him in the 3rd, and that now that looks like a deal. And I think people at the time were like, well, I don't know. But if you really study players and you study the full context, like I think that's what I would say is Brad Holmes. Man, it's so different to hear this when you hear people around the league. The people in the league respect the Lions because number one, they respect Dan Campbell. Because if you played football or you've been around the NFL for the last 20 years, you probably know him because he's been everywhere and knows everybody. But they all respect Holmes and they respect that approach. He's honest with people. He did not lie to Jamal Williams or do anything else. I don't think that was ever. Jamal said, I was offended by the offer. Okay, that's your opinion. But there was no deviousness there. And I think that's another thing, too. They've been straight up. When they say they're going to do something, we have seen them do it. I have not seen one thing yet where it's been the other one, something that we're like, well, that's not exactly what you said you were going to do. And, we've seen that, of course, over the years here ad nauseum, I'll say.
Moving on to, sorry, Steve.
So I was going to say, everything seems so rosy in the garden in free agency. But then we come to our everyone's favorite mild-mannered Detroit Free Press columnist, Carlos. Who has written an article this week where he quotes, I'll give you a quote. So Dan Campbell told reporters, I think we're positioned much better to swing with the big boys this year. My question for Campbell would be, why exactly? Sure, the Lions filled some holes with some solid players, just like every other team does. But where's the difference maker or the game wrecker or the perennial Pro Bowler? Where's the elite of the elite edition? And, Carlos kind of goes on to say, we've not really taken any really major free agents. We've not taken a swing for Lamar Jackson. And we know that Carlos is like a contrarian and he loves to kind of like,
it's kind of an act at this point.
I guess just from our point of view. Yes. Is there any underlying truth in that we are somehow talking the Lions into winning free agency? And,
no, I don't think so. And I think that I understand even that I wouldn't agree with it. And I think it's kind of one of those, maybe an extreme criticism, but I can understand maybe where even hypothetically where it'd be rooted from, because you're saying, hey, we think we're more ready to swing with the big boys. Okay, well, where was what did you do to improve yourself? And the Lions counter to that was, we got better at every spot with 21-year-olds all year. Where's the perennial Pro Bowler? It's Penei Sewell and Aiden Hutchinson. They're already here. Where's the superstar? Like, that's what their counter would be in Detroit. Now, next year this is what I've said. Next year, if they, sort of go through it and are sort of timid and maybe don't get in there, because they did make a play a little bit this year. They did get in there a little bit and talk with Calais Campbell. And last year they talked with Allen Robinson. It wasn't, they got out of it pretty quickly because that money got pretty high, and same thing with Campbell. But like next year, that's, I think, when you go and do that. That's when, if you take care of your business this year in the draft and you finish this rebuild and you say, while you're competitive, because they will be, you get another edge to go opposite Hutchinson along with James Houston. And then everything you do on defense from there on out could be about just signing the best available. Like, hey, if Bobby Wagner's hanging around, let's go get him, like that kind of stuff, like that kind of stuff that we get asked about every year, kind of stuff he's that Carlos is writing about, like, why didn't you go sign Calais Campbell? Why didn't you just go do it? That would have shown the fans you're serious. And it's like, that's what Carlos always does. You got to show the fans. It's like, well, I think that show the fans by being consistent and patient for a change. How about that? I think that that's what they've been doing. And even Carlos would admit that, of course, he knows that. But, I think that's the point to remember in this whole thing. Next year, though, that certainly is a more fair argument, because if they don't make the playoffs or have some problems and they need some holes to be fixed, and they're like, well, we're still Not quite. That's when you start saying, no, we're not doing this. This isn't going to be a thing where you just like, we inch by every year and then we get a little bit better, a little bit better. At some point, you got to make the swing. I don't think they're there quite yet.
And I think,
sorry,
I was just going to say, I think from our point of view, I don't think we feel we need to get Jalen Ramsey. When we signed CJ,
right?
Like, I remember
exactly.
I remember waking up and seeing that and thinking, "Oh shit, they're serious."
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I agree.
For me, that was
yeah. And I think that Jalen, I don't know what the price was there, and I don't know how serious they did or didn't talk, but I would bet you they probably kicked the tires. I promise you, they kicked the tires. But and I would say the same thing. That's a great point. Like CJ Gardner-Johnson's a phenomenal signing, and they got him on a crazy deal. I think that's the other thing too. So look, that's probably the one thing Carlos could maybe find that was maybe a little bit out there, but even that's a little bit of a stretch, quite frankly.
Just going to invoke a question that we had from a user earlier, and it's about the draft. But I think the point really is about philosophy, and I think it dips into free agency too. So I'll read the question, and then I'll kind of spin it a little bit. It's from Between the Numbers, Anthony, at Between the Numbers on Twitter. He asks, has the luxury pick narrative or the thought that the Lions can afford to take a risk in the first round gone too far? Questions inspired by Dan Campbell's quote at the end of the owners' meetings about raising the floor. They were only 9-8 after all. There is more growth to be had. And I think that extends to free agency too, because the word for me that encapsulates Holmes so far is shrewd.
Yes,
he makes moves at good value for solid players that are culture fits and says, go and be bigger than the sum of your parts. Doesn't make a splash or not at a big price yet. Do you think that teams can win like this and just say, you know what, we're not going to push money into the future ever, and we can then be this all day? We can keep this up for 20 years at this level, and maybe we don't go all in trying to be the favourite to win the Super Bowl, but if we make the dance every year and we believe in ourselves that, there's a chance here, that we'll just do this forever? Or do you think that at some point a splash needs to come?
Yeah, I think it's both, because I think you could, at certain positions, if you just stick to your guns and you just do those things, and those certain positions with a team like this being the lines, your offensive and defensive lines, if you are routinely strong in your ability to run the ball and stop the run, and they invest in both of those areas as well through the draft as anyone I think in the league has over the last 2 years. Some of the luck has worked against them, some of it's worked out when they found guys off of the market and everything else. But if you continue to just do that and never take a risk in those spots and just make those shrewd moves and those super important, stay good there, then I think you have a chance. Now, to be special though, to really be special, you gotta have to make the swing. That's just in today's world, unless they get a Mahomes or unless they land on a quarterback like that, to get yourself over the top, it can be done, and you can win. I firmly believe you can win a Super Bowl doing that. We've seen it historically, if you have the right team, but the team has to be pretty flawless, and that usually involves you making that calculated risk of okay, this is the year where we're going to mortgage more of our future than we probably would be comfortable with, because we think that players X, Y, and Z are peaking right now, and we need to max it out right now. So I think you can keep changing your parts over and stay true to who you are. But, unless you have that elite quarterback, that's the thing that keeps you at that top conversation, or it should. But also, as we've seen with Matthew Stafford around here, maybe not always. So I think that we'll see. That's the fascinating part of this, because they're building it a different way, in a new way. And also a way that I think a lot of other teams with young GMs they do it similar to how the Lions are working right now, if you look around the league. So, yeah, I'm curious to see how it all goes.
So, in terms of Holmes and how he's building and his strategy, and I guess we're talking about his competence and the kind of tactics, is the biggest sort of testament to what he's done so far the fact that, from what I've seen, and I've read 101 mock drafts, no one has any clue what the Lions are going to do in the draft. Trade up, trade down, corner, defense. No one's got no idea. Absolutely. Is that his biggest win?
I feel like that's a great point, and it might be because, like, I think it means that those of us that follow this, right, we all see like, well, okay, what do we? A lot of guys, if you really follow GMs or scouts, you're like, okay, well, they have types, right? They have certain particular things that they like. Brett Holmes has a lot of types. He has a lot of things that he likes, and I think that it's really dynamic, and he can surprise you sometimes with reasons why he likes one guy over another guy, and that's why it's super interesting to talk to him about prospects. But that is a super good point because I think there's not a lot of tell there with other than like the guy's got to love football, right? Like other than that, like that's pretty much all we know about his preference at pretty much any position other than like, does he have traits? Does he have stuff you can't teach? If he has stuff you can't teach, we will bring him here and we will make it an environment where he'll max out. So I think that everybody gets leery of guys like that, you know, in those mid rounds because it's like, what are you doing? What are you sitting on? Who are you? Kirby Joseph, like guys like that. Who are you waiting on? And I think that there might be some of that for sure.
When we're picking at 2 last year, like there's a limit to how you can kind of mix up your tactics. You're picking at 2. You're going to
people even then were a little bit like, I don't know.
But picking at 6, all of a sudden, like everything's on the table. And I would say the consensus is there's 2 superstar quarterbacks, and then there's 2 really, really good players in Jalen Carter and Anderson. And then you've got 2 intriguing prospects in Levis and Richardson.
Right.
So one of those players, one of those 6 could fall to the Lions. Or like say if 3 quarterbacks go and then Carter and then Anderson, and maybe we don't want to take a risk on Levis. The 6th pick, we could pick anyone, but there's also a massive opportunity to trade that pick because actually at 9, 10, 11, 12, we could still get the player like Devin Weatherspoon, if that's the guy, if that's the Aaron Glenn mold guy that's going to add value at corner. He could be there at 8, 9, 10, 11. Like no one knows.
Exactly. And I think that that's the best way to say this because their options are sort of limitless, and it really does depend on, how the board sort of falls, because I think at the end of the day, they have what they need to get their favorite player in this draft. It's not going to be Stroud or Bryce Young, their favorite non-quarterback. If they want to get Will Anderson, they can go get him, and it's not going to cost that much. You know what I'm saying? Like that's affordable. And that's crazy to me. Like Will Anderson with Aiden Hutchinson would be like, what are we talking about here? So that's but if it's Witherspoon, you have the whatever to position yourself to get him where you need to get him. And I think that you could say that about anybody really there. And that's why they're in such a great spot.
It's a weird combination of what Holmes is like and also what draft you're dealt, because if you transported the Lions to 2 in this draft, I still think you have no idea where they're going, because I think Will Anderson would be very much on the table, but Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson would have a lot of...
I don't know. Exactly. Would CJ Stroud or would one of those quarterbacks change the math, in his head? And I think that's the thing that people can't figure out with Brett Holmes is because it always changes. It's changing, it's evolving. The equation of like, what is a good this, what is a good that? Especially when you're running a team, like what do we need versus how good is this versus what's it cost? It's never so rigid that it doesn't change. Like that was Bob Quinn's problem. I always felt like, and Bob Quinn and Patricia too. They're both obviously huge failures at their job here, but they weren't like totally clueless. They knew some things, but it would still be, they'd bring up points and you're like, that's a good point, but this has changed. Well, no, it hasn't. And you're like, well, yes, it has. Like, you got to be honest with yourself, And I think that is what Holmes does as well as anybody going right now is like Campbell too, but like the self-awareness and the honesty with yourself. They just don't lie to themselves ever. Like they just don't ever do that. And like, I feel like that's what the hallmark of great team, the Ravens, except for right now with Lamar, but like over the years, they've been a great franchise at that. They don't make stupid decisions in the draft. They don't make stupid signings. They don't lie to themselves. They don't try to do something that they're not capable of. And I think that Lions finally seem to have good personnel that understands that.
I mean, is what happened? So you had an article about. Did he have an article about Lamar Jackson recently? No. I might be imagining things.
Wasn't me. Somebody probably did though.
No, yeah. But what you were saying about Lamar Jackson and them not lying to themselves or not doing something that they can't do, is that not does that philosophy not take you exactly where we are? Because I kind of think they're not lying to themselves by saying, hey, Lamar, the reality of the situation is with your play and your injury history and the way you play and the possible injury future, we don't think we can afford you at your current price. And I don't think they've lied to him about it. And to be honest, although they've not come and said it in public, it's transparent exactly what they've done and why.
Exactly.
So I think that they've inevitably come here, and I think they're like, you know what? If the end of it is that we get 2 first-round picks from this, we took him at 32, that's a win. Even though they inevitably get worse next year, they look at the 2 first-round picks and say, maybe we have one bad season with a great roster, and then we go again.
And in 2 years, we're moving on. Yeah,
100%.
And that's the hallmark of consistency. That's the hallmark of what you do and how you do it. Your decisions are not made before they're before it's time to make them. You're not making a decision 9 months before it's time to make that. It's all time and place and context and being confident in yourself to not get to know that that was when Holmes made that trade in division and was self-aware and confident enough to be like, I don't care. I'm going to do it. If you guys think that he's working me, which he's not, cool. I don't care. And that to me is always the sign of a great GM. If you don't care what the Twitter trade grade crew says, then you're on your way.
Well, never mind the grading. The grading kind of was saying afterwards that, we fleeced him a little bit in the draft.
Yeah, right.
In the draft trade. And it's I bet in his head, after they agreed it in the draft, they were like, I can't fucking believe he's agreed to this. What the hell's going on?
Yeah, probably, because I think especially with that one, it was this is what we wanted to do all along. So wow, I can't believe he's doing it and it's an interdivision team. But yeah, they're in a good spot. I like where they're at right now.
So in terms of the draft strategy, then, I know this is, absolute. This is memento wallboard stuff.
Yeah.
But the way my kind of logical brain sort of works it down is, okay, there's 2 QBs that might be in play for us in terms of Richardson and Levis. The question I'd be asking Brad Holmes is next year's draft class a better opportunity for us to make that move at QB than a shot at those 2 guys? What's your view on that?
So I would say that it is. It is, but I would also add that it's going to be a more competitive trade market next year, and the price is probably going to be more expensive. Because
we're probably not going to be at 6,
and you're not going to be at 6. So you're going to have you're probably going to have a much lower draft pick. I think they still have some extra seconds, but it would take a lot. It would be kind of like what they did, what the Rams did to go get Goff, where they traded everything. It was the whole draft basically, and that's kind of what they would have to do. But Caleb Williams and Drake May are generational. They're Trevor Lawrence level. That's where we would bucket them, in the guys that you would trade a lot of stuff to go get. I don't think I would trade that much. I don't think I would do it for Bryce Young. I would probably trade a decent amount for Stroud. But that's it in this draft. And I think next year you could say that about at least 2 guys. You've also got J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, who I think is a nice player. And there's some other guys that are younger that have nice arm talent that are going to be intriguing, that are going to be in that McCarthy, Levis, the talent is going to be something that teams are going to look at. So my point is there's going to be more high-end talent, I think, coming out next year, just and beyond those 2 guys that everybody talks about. So it'll just be a better class in general.
Our own Anthony Fitzpatrick has been a KJ Jefferson stan for as long as he can remember. And I know he's going to be a bit older now when he comes out, but I think Arkansas's been an interesting offense for the last few years.
There's a lot of guys. A lot of young guys, and it's quarterbacks go in weird waves. Clemson's got that young kid Klubnik right now. That's I think about to be a sophomore who's just phenomenal. But it's random. It's just random when they pop out. And the hard part is there's just not that many of them anymore. And I always say on our show, I subscribe to the Kyle Shanahan theory of there are not 32 starting quarterbacks walking the earth. There are only so many, and you have to know the difference between a real starting quarterback in the NFL and someone that people just say could be. And so that to me is kind of how you look at quarterbacks.
So let's say hypothetically then that we get to 6. The say 3 of the 4 QBs have gone. We don't want to go for say Levis. Carter's gone. Anderson's gone. Someone like Devin Weatherspoon, I love him as a player. Seems a great culture fit. what we need in terms of, we need to enhance the defense. We know that the corner situation is going to be fluid next year. Would you take Weatherspoon at 6, or would you be thinking, I'm going to like trade out of this if the phone rings and roll the dice?
I think at that point I would consider, I wouldn't mind it. Because some people, I think they think that's too high for him. I don't think that's too high for him if that's what you want to do. Like if he's your guy. But I would also say that if like Tyree Wilson is there or one of these edges, I would also consider that. And I've had people ask me why, because they bring up James Houston. What would you, well, what does that mean? James Houston had 7 sacks, or it was, or maybe more than that. I don't remember, crazy amount there in the last however many games. And so what do you do? That's his job. And I'm like, well, first of all, we have to see him do that on a 3-down basis over the course of a season before we can call him anything more than like a designated hitter, which is kind of what he was, last year, a home run hitter at that, but like, pass rush specialist. Hutchinson is a 3-down, never comes off the field, Pro Bowl level star player. If you add another edge of Aiden Hutchinson's physical caliber, along with a James Houston and Aleem McNeil, then I think that you can kind of do anything you want defensively in the back. You know what I mean? That's when you can start making those luxury signings that Carlos is talking about, where it's like, now we add an older guy for a little bit more maybe, but like we're really upgrading, and I think that if your front is taken care of, that to me would be enticing still. I would still want to look at Wilson or maybe one of those other edges. But yeah, I probably will still want to try to trade out. Number 1. Number 2 would be that. Van Ness would also be a guy I wouldn't totally rule out. I really like him a lot, but 6 is awful high there for him.
Got a couple of questions which relate to what we were talking about in terms of 2024, because if we're not going to be at 6, well, we could be at 6 if we trade with the right person to come down. But then the right person, how far down are they now and where are they projecting? So, I'm kind of thinking that the Vikings might be in that sort of territory. But that's quite a long way to go down. But there are other teams that might be kind of lower down that are descending as we're ascending.
Yeah.
So one question was, how far do the Lions have to trade down to net a first-round pick in 2024? And Cool Down Rat just asked, would you swap draft capital to aid next year's draft? Which is basically the same question, I guess. Right,
yeah. I think you'd have to trade down quite a ways to get a 1 back on that one. It would have to be significant, I would think. And I don't think they would want to necessarily do that. But, I guess to the point of like these quarterbacks next year, that could be like you're loading up. The 49ers tried that with Lance. I don't know, like maybe it'll work out. But yeah, I don't know. I think you'd have to go down quite a bit to get what was the other part of that question?
It was just, so would you trade down to aid next year, and how far would you have to trade down to net a 1?
Yeah, I think you'd have to trade down too far to net a 1. And would I trade up to get a guy? I don't know if I would trade up to get a guy next year. I think that would like all depend on, because that's the thing, that all this depends on Goff. Like everything about their math going forward offensively depends on him. Like I really think you can win with him playing at the level they played at last year. That was good football, and that was where they're at right now as a team. They don't have any business saying that they're too good for Jared Goff. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not there yet. And so to me, I don't think they're going to be there in a good minute either. I don't think it's going to be a thing where, in the next couple of years, Jared Goff is the only reason why they're. And if it is the case that he's holding them back, then that's a different conversation. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they've kind of helped and got him recentered and got an offense that really fits around him really well. And I don't know.
Goff didn't have Jameson Williams last year.
He didn't, and like that's the other part. Like they're going to add him. They got that other 8. They got 18 here this year. If they want to add, I keep bringing up Bijan Robinson. People don't want to hear it, but like that would be a ridiculous add to an offense like this. Ridiculous add.
Right. So let's ask this question, because we asked this question last week, and I know that you get plenty of mail in from your readers. But I think that the reaction may not be what you suspect. You wrote an article on drafting Bijan. I mean, do you think that he's in play at 6 at all? Or so would he be your number 1 pick at 18 if on the board, no matter who else is there? Yeah.
Yes.
I thought so.
At 18 he would be, yes. At 6, Probably not, because I think you could still make the case that you could, like, I mean, especially depending on who's sitting there, right? Like we've talked about all these different scenarios. Even if it's like all the guys that we think are going to be gone are gone, and it's just like Wilson, Tyree Will, I would take him maybe. I would still really want to think about him long and hard there. But 18, and honestly, if I had to move up a couple, I would do that, because I just think this guy is that. And I just think he's the guy. I don't think he's better than Saquon, but I think he's like in that ballpark, and like that is good enough for me. Like,
I mean, I do think he's better than Saquon, and I made a video.
Better, so hey,
well, he's my in terms of pure talent, I think he's the number one player in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, he's top 10 for sure, top 5, I would say probably. I mean, he's phenomenal. I mean, I don't think people give him. I'm glad that you took the time, because not a lot of people seem to be now. As we get closer, they are. I'll give them credit. As we get closer, people are starting to get more wise on it. But it's like I keep telling people, like, he is not what we would just he's not a running back. He's more than that. It's not that's diminishing what he is if you just label him into a bucket like that.
Well, and he wasn't used very much in the pass game, although he was very good at it at Texas as well.
He was underutilized. The only dings on him are his, he fumbled probably too many times, although I don't think he lost that many, but he did have some fumble issues. And then, it's production, but it's also like, that's not his fault. Like, I mean, the production is the choice of whatever Sarkisian's running at Texas. Plus, he shared the backfield with Roschon Johnson, who is a really good back and is going to be a pick. And Bijan, I think that shows selflessness. He's a good kid. People like him. I think he'd fit really well in Detroit.
The whole Bijan mustard thing is trending already,
I
swear. We had a question from Damian Smith about him as well, and it's about drafting Bijan. If we do, considering how much we paid Montgomery, how do the two fit in a room together? Because for $6 million, you don't really want Montgomery to be a pure backup, but they're both not good enough receiving backs to have them basically be feature wide receivers if they're not the feature back. So how would that work? Because neither of them are particularly bruising backs. They can both do it, but it's not their forte. They're kind of both vision guys, both break tackle guys. There's a lot of redundancy there.
There is, but I think that it allows you to be versatile in ways that, where they can both be on the field at the same time, and you mess with matchups and teams don't know what you're doing, or you sub, or you mess with personnel, or you change formations. To me, and I understand the complementary back thing. If you're going to do it sort of on the economical sense, that needs to be what you're doing. You need to have a guy that runs the gap, and you need to have a guy that can run the zone. In this case, if you have two guys who are true capable, like full scale, they can help themselves. And in today's world, we know that's just not going to happen. You're going to split load. To me, that's better, especially if you're a team that's rooted in the run game, because, again, the offensive line here is one of the best young groups in football. Their offensive line, if you go back and you look at like the average line yards last year that were created, they were among the best in the league, and they left yards on the field. Jamal and Swift both did. And I think that when Ben Johnson brought that up, I think right away when the season ended, like, we left a ton of rushing yards on the field. And like, I was like, look, if you guys, I know a guy that can get all those yards for you if you want him in the draft. I mean, like, and Montgomery is a missed tackle machine, just like, Bijan is. So even if you don't get Bijan, you've added a playmaker like that, raising the floor, trying to pick, we're blocking these yards. The play's blocked for 15 yards. We need a back that can go get us 15 yards on that, like that's kind of what they're at now. And I think they're growing up. And I think that's kind of the what we're seeing here.
And what's quite interesting about Bijan, and you don't really think that it's an important thing until it might be an important thing, is that because they have Roschon Johnson, they actually ran a lot of split backfield with Bijan blocking for Roschon. So if you ran a split backfield with David and him, he could do the dirty work in terms of being a fullback. He could do that.
Well, I mean, it's also, you're moving them around in motion. They can both catch. We've seen teams in the past. One of my favorite things that the Packers used to do with Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones was they put them both out there, and Rodgers would direct traffic, and you didn't know what they were doing, and it would be jet motion. Sometimes it'd get a handoff. Sometimes it'd be nothing. Sometimes you'd run around. I mean, it would just be, if you're a matchup offense and you truly operate that way, which is what, Ben Johnson specializes in, and Campbell really. I just think guys like that are great in space, you can't have enough of them. And they already have St. Brown, who is just a magic in those spots, in the phone booth. and Jameson, and we just have not. We still haven't seen all that he can do yet, and so. One more weapon like that, that's what I keep thinking. One more, and that would maybe be a big difference.
When we were talking about this with Dave Burkett last week, my point that has kind of been bugging me was with this O-line, this is like a top 5 O-line, and we always talk about windows to win.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to throw a Bijan in there, surely this is the time to do it. Like, part of me saying, don't draft a running back so high, but the other part of me saying, while we've got this O-line, let's use it. Let's absolutely max it out. What we can.
And he's on his rookie deal. He's on his rookie contract. You're going to get him as cheap as humanly possible for the rookie deal. And like I keep comparing it to Zeke Elliott, right? And his run in Dallas just ended. I think it was 7 years. And he had 8,000 rushing yards, maybe more than that, maybe almost close to 10,000. And all the very productive. And it's not his fault that the team did not do what it needed to do. He gave them what they needed from him over that period of time. And now that time has ended and you move on. And I think that's how you look at running backs. And that's, to Steve's point, you want to max out that talent from your back with the best possible line you can give him in that environment. And that's why I think that they're ready. That's the type of swing I'd like to see them make. A skill guy like that. They did it last year too with Jameson, to be fair. But I'd like to see them do it again, to be honest. I think that Chris Burke always brings up tight end. This is a great year for tight ends. I wouldn't hate that either in some ways, if they wanted to change some things up. So, yeah, we'll see how they handle it.
Bijan, Darnell, and number 1 offense in the NFL would be in the ballpark potentially.
Good, yeah.
Just going to get to the remainder of the questions we have, and there are quite a lot. So if we're running long and you want to get out of here, just let us know.
Let me go I can go till 4 here, or to the top of the hour.
Okay, let's do that. So. Our own Ash says, what's your opinion on, because he's a homer for Florida State, safety Jamie Robinson and his potential fit here?
I do like him a lot. I watched him for quite a bit down in Mobile one day and saw him make several plays in a row. And I liked him because I think he's a guy who could play both safety spots. And I don't know what the Lions are going to do there, though. That's my question. Is I almost kind of feel like now that I look up at it, it's like, okay, well, you've got Joseph, you've got Gardner Johnson, at least for the year. And I mean, frankly, I think that if things go well, they could probably figure out something to keep him here. You got Tracy Walker. They still have Melifonwu back there that they're developing and they haven't given up on. Maybe they're okay. I mean, maybe they're okay at safety. That's kind of my one thing with the safeties in the Lions right now. Because I don't know. I don't know how much they value it right now in the draft.
All right. Favorite DT in the class isn't Jalen Carter.
Probably either Cansey or good man. I was just thinking of one the other day, and it was a Big Ten guy. Oh, Keanu Benton is he's underrated, and the Wisconsin kid, yeah, because so many people have been all over, and rightly so. Adebaware from Northwestern, who's just freaky guy, right? Like with the length but Benton is rock solid, just a steady, he's not a first round pick or anything like that, but like a steady, solid, can get some pass rush a little bit and is really good against the run, got good length, moves really well. He's another guy at the Senior Bowl. He killed it. I don't think anybody got him once in any time I saw him. So he's the guy that Gervon Dexter's growing on me, but Benton is a fave.
All right. Let's go for. Okay, we talked about Witherspoon. This is Brandon Kerr's question. We talked about Witherspoon before, and everything you hear about him is basically he's probably the best fit for the Lions in terms of any position in the draft, just because of who he is as a player,
personality, and everything. Yeah.
The question is, who is the next person like that? The one after him that you can think of, that's a grit guy, that's a Campbell guy. Anyone.
Probably both the guys he played with at Illinois, Sidney Brown and Quan Martin, are both very similar. They're both very similar.
That's incredible, because his question went on to say, what do you think of the other Illinois DBs? So those
are the guys. That's the team right now that I can't stop watching, because they're like, and I was just on earlier this week with our Bears podcast, and those guys also watch Illinois football, and I was talking to them about some of those guys, and I'm like, I don't know what has happened, and it's Bielema has figured it out. I think he went to the NFL after he had it working at Wisconsin. Eras changed, things change. It didn't work in the SEC. He goes to the NFL, and now he knows what these teams want out of defensive backs, and he is finding these DBs that just play with like reckless, and they're just physically confident. They're not afraid of anything. They have terrific ball skills. Like I think Kirby was a volleyball player at one point in high school. Like just like he's doing a great job because these Illinois kids are all dogs. I mean, they don't care. They knocked everybody on their ass at the Senior Bowl, and it was like that all year. That was not that great of a football team, and they were in way more games than they should have been, and probably won more games than they should have as well.
So Nigel Sanderson on Twitter asks, if Jalen Carter is still there at number 6, do we take him? And then the kind of supplementary question is, if we have taken Carter at 6, maybe over Witherspoon, what will be our options at cornerback left at 18?
Yeah, so I wouldn't rule it out with Carter at 6. I think the Lions have either had him in or will have him in. He is on a 30 visit for them, so he will be in Allen Park, or either has been at some point. I wouldn't rule it out, but it's all going to depend on what they find, both when they talk to him in person, and we know what Brad Holmes he does as a scout. He turns over every rock. I think that it actually probably helps them that Holmes was he was an Atlanta area scout for many, many years. And if there's any area of the country that he does have ties, I think he was a Pac-12 scout and then also in the SEC. So I think he has pretty good knowledge of people down there and people he can trust. So if they don't take him, that means that it was too much. Whatever has happened here was too much to deal with, and he's in a place that isn't productive, because I think that's what they're weighing is, what are we getting when we get him? I think they think that their locker room is good enough to handle him, whatever that is, whatever the baggage is. But if he's a mess, and he might be, and like his pro day was bad, that was a bad deal. I don't know why he went out there, but that did not look good. So if he's a mess, he's going to fall, and that's going to be something where I'm not sure if they're wanting to do that, and that would be the question I would have. And if they passed on corners at 18, I still think Deontay Banks is my favorite of that next group after Porter, and I think he's worthy of a first-round pick for sure. Emmanuel Forbes is right on that fringe as well.
I mean, if you'd have said 6 months ago that Carter would possibly on the board for the Lions at 6, I mean, you'd have absolutely...
Wouldn't even blink. You're clicking your heels. And they might still, because look, again, I've heard, everybody hears mixed stuff on this, and I've heard that's bad. I've heard that, it's not great. There's more, nothing about his situation looks great. And if you dig into it, it doesn't often look much better. But I've also never really heard anybody come out and say, like, this is a bad person. I've never yet to hear anybody tell me he's just the bad guy. That's
if anything, the opposite. The whole buying teammates lunch in the
right.
I
feel like he's a guy that he's a kid. He's a dumb kid. I think that's mostly what I hear. Now, that can be bad, and that could be something that you can't fix. And that's going to be when they get knee to knee with him, and that's why it's going to help them a ton to have Campbell and Glenn, because those guys have been around all of it. They're Parcells guys. Parcells was the king of, I'll take anybody if you can, prove that you can show up to work on time. I don't care. And so they'll get to the bottom of it, I think. I trust that. If they take him, they think that they can handle it. I think that I would trust that.
Not that this is a question, but just to kind of state this for the guys live as well. Lots has been made of him not taking any outside top 10 visits, or people not willing to trade up into the top 10 for him. I kind of think that with his potentially fragile mental state with what's going on still, I think limiting the number of visits he has is smart.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You hear people that have a visit every single day up until the draft now, and it's like, how mentally exhausting is this going to be for a guy that really needs to kind of repair his rep, maybe get a few private workouts in where he actually looks a bit better than he did in his pro day? Like, his agent, while publicly it looks bad, is kind of saying, this is a top 10 pick, we'll prove it, don't worry about that.
Right.
But also, I'm looking after him, and he doesn't need this. So
100% agree with that. I 100% agree with that, because it's not necessary. I just saw a thing today. I think Ian Rappaport reported that Josh Downs, who's going to be no worse than like 40, didn't take any visits. He stopped taking any. he just said, I'm not doing it. If you want to draft me. And I mean, hey, look, like that's not for everybody, but I think if you're Jalen Carter and we know who his agent is, the big dog there, then you just say, like, yes, this is the best defensive player in the draft. You all know it. So I'm not going to BS you and act like this is something different. I think that's fine. I wouldn't have any problem with that.
I mean, surely after his pro day, the last thing that you want with Jalen Carter is him to spend
him
3 weeks eating like airport food.
No, he needs to get in shape, I would think, right? Like, that's what I would want. Like, go get in shape because I want you to be out there for mini camp because that's the thing. Wherever he goes, that team is going to have to take him in and be like, we're going to assign someone to be with you 24 hours a day. You are now ours. You're no longer Georgia's. We're cutting ties from everybody that you know in the state of Georgia, and you are coming into us. Like, because that's going to have to be what happens, And wrap your
protective
arms around
custody.
Completely. Yeah, protective custody. That's right. Yeah.
Getting lots of love, Nick, from the chat with you being on here. Dave VJ just saying thanks for the chat, Nick. Always great insight. Love listening to you and Colton. Just going to try and rapid fire through the rest of the questions. Ian Carr at Deadline UK on Twitter says, and we were kind of talking about this before, what's the level of concern about JMO not fulfilling his promise and a bit of an assumption that he'll make the leap? And just to kind of twist the question a bit, we were talking about this later, and it's not about him not fulfilling the promise because the criticism is well overblown about whatever's happening with his likes on Twitter, and who cares? But like, everyone's talking in the off season about like, oh, and we've got JMO and we didn't have him last year, and he touched the ball 3 times and there were 3 big plays. But going from that to this is a 1,000-yard guy as a Z on the outside is also kind of a bit of a leap. And are we kind of hoping that just a bit too much from him next year?
Yeah, I think you got to be careful there for sure because of the injury, and it's like you never quite know if, and especially with a guy like that, because his superpower is the second level burst, the ability to separate. And we did see that last year. We saw it was back, and that is really what makes him special. And I think that once he gets his body back to, because you could see how skinny he looked, right? Like it looked like little chicken legs running around out there a couple times. The first couple games, it was like, he was super easy to find from upstairs because he was so thin. But like once he gets his body up to, to be able to handle everything, then, I think that you're going to see a guy that we started to see at Alabama, which was just an explosive, oh my God, guy that you really have to have a plan for, or he's going to just go over the top on you 3 times a game and you're doing it. There's nothing you do. And I think the other thing to say would be, and Goff said this in like November, December, he's like, we barely played together. Like we'll figure it out. We'll get there, but like, give us a minute to get there. And, let's get St. Brown around him and things like that. So I think you had to be careful to see how he responds to the knee, but yeah, I mean, he's still a terrific prospect.
I mean, you really saw that as well in there because I think there was a stat that like he was 2 of 9 targeted early, or 1 of 9, or 1 of 10.
It was all off the place.
It was really bad, the chemistry. Let's go back to quarterbacks. Ash asked, what would you do? Get the quarterback of the future in this class, aim for next year's class, or maybe set. We kind of covered that a bit, I guess. And Lions Pride 8123 on Twitter asked, what have you heard on Lions' interest in Richardson? Seems like they've been mum on the top QBs. But as far as I know, the Lions were pretty much at every game in Florida this year.
Yes, they were. But I would also add this. Florida has like 10 guys who are going to get drafted. So Florida, they got a lot of dudes. Florida was a way more talented team than their record showed, which probably isn't great for Florida fans. But like at the end of the day, like I think that's something to take away from that too. But, he plays that quarterback card so close, and he always has with Goff. And I think that's what like some of the beat writers have issues with sometimes, where they get caught up or tripped up, where they're like, well, you've never really said that Jared Goff is your guy. We've asked you that point blank. And he has been asked that point blank many times, and he's been very careful, like shrewd, right?
Villain.
Yeah, villain. And he's been very careful with what he says. And I think that the thing that happened with Jamal, like, I think that you just never quite, you have to, under villain is probably a good thing to have on the chest. Don't underestimate, right? And I think that that would be something I would keep in mind as well.
With a guy like Richardson, there's probably no better person than Goff for him to sit behind for a season and a half.
I think it'd be great. I think that, I don't know how Goff would handle it. I mean, you'd like to think that he would handle it well. But all I know is like he was in a really bad place mentally when he got here. and really bad. And like they fixed it. They helped him so much here. And I think that last year, and he deserves most of the credit, probably all of it, but the Lions helped him a ton. And like last year at the end of the year, you could really hear it from him where he was like, I just want to play for Dan Campbell. I don't care about anything else anymore. Like, that's it. I just want to win for him. So Dan Campbell went to ask him, hey man, I need you to help us. I don't know if he'd love it, but I bet he'd do it and he wouldn't make a fuss about it, you know. And I think it would be he would take it serious and he would treat him right and all that sort of stuff. So because he knows, like, he was on his ass when he came here, and they wrapped their arms around him, boy. I mean, that was, and it was bad. It was like if Goff has a rough start to the season, he's done. Like he's never coming back.
Oh, I called for him to be benched.
Right.
Oh, it was really bad.
And no one was going to pick him up. He was going to be out of the league. Like that was the next step for him. And I think it was a rattling thing. And like, they really did a good job with him. And I think that that's what I've thought about a lot with this. Like, would he be against the 2 years ago? He would have been against it. He would have thrown a fit. A year ago, he might have thrown a fit. I don't know about now. I think he's grown up an awful lot in the last 2 years.
And also, if you think back to our conversation about Jalen Carter, like if we can, you know, like I said, put our arms around and give that sympathy and support,
exactly,
and rebuild Goff, then surely
like he fired Anthony Lynn, who's a really good football coach, because he just didn't get along with Goff, and it was nothing personal. It was just that's what he did. Okay, done. Like that's the type of stuff, right? So it's like I think that Jared didn't forget that, and I do remember that a lot.
All right, let's go through these next few in as little time as we can, because the listeners in here who've asked these questions, and I want to get to as many as I can. So later round quarterbacks, Stetson Bennett, Clayton Tune, anyone there kind of taking your fancy, that sort of range?
I'm not a Bennett guy. I don't like to. I like Aiden O'Connell down there. I like the Purdue Aiden O'Connell and Duggan. I am not giving up on Max Duggan. I just think there's, for a backup, you know, man, I think that guy could be great. Like
Duggan's not giving up on Duggan, and we know that.
No, he's never going to give up. So right, exactly.
Jordan Manchin.
You don't think Hendon Hook is in play on day 2?
No, maybe, but like they do like him. I know that. I guess that depends on where he goes. That depends. I know they like him. He and Ray Agnew, I saw them spend some time together at the Senior Bowl. But there are people that like him an awful lot, it seems, and there's at least been buzz about maybe he'll go way higher. I guess we'll have to see where he falls. If he's there in the third, yeah, I could see them taking him. Not in the second, probably, though. I think that'd be a little high.
Okay, 2 more. Mike the Marine asks, which one? Okay, since the Lions do not have a round 4 pick, are there any players that are kind of mocked in that sort of range right now that you would consider trading up or down into?
Ooh, that is a really good question. Yeah, like, for instance, if you don't take Bijan Robinson and some of these running backs start falling, because one guy that I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a top 20 player that somebody's going to get at like 45, you know, or whatever. And like that's, and that's how it's going to go. This is a good class, you know, Charbonnet, Tyjae Spears, Eric Gray. There's a bunch of guys. And so if you had like a guy that you loved in that group, and they're all there on day at the top of day 3, I wouldn't be opposed to that, because this is a good running back class. They're deep, and this would be a good year to take a guy like that. Even if you're not gonna take Bijan or whatever, they still need something else. He has not proven enough to be the answer here, so you're gonna need to take another guy no matter what.
Last one, the one highlighted, Steve. Bolded.
Which one? We just okay. What do you think that we're saving our cap space for? We've still got like millions left.
Yes, a lot of money. Yeah,
we're third, I think, with 25 million or something.
Yeah. So, and this is the Carlos's thing. This is a great way to end it, really, because it's like their cap money is all into their youth. It's already on the team. Like their cap is being saved to pay Hutchinson, Sewell. I would assume guys like, and you could probably keep going for guys that are probably going to be in the conversation. Like Kirby Joseph is going to need to get paid if he continues to develop the way that we think he can. Jonah, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to need to get paid. Jameson Williams, if he takes off the way that you want him to get paid. Like their faith, I think, in their future money is really in so many of these guys. Elaine McNeil, like they're not going to let him go if they can help it. Like a lot of guys like that, and if you really go across the board and you start stacking them up, it's like, man, they do have a lot of really good young football players. And the thing that I think that they tell us behind the scenes is like our cap space is fake. It's not real because it's all spoken for. It's all for our guys. It's all for our guys when they come up, whenever the deal comes up, because that's the sign of the best GMs is like, we already have a plan for when we're going to start talking, how we're going to talk, where we want to go with it, X, Y, and Z. It's not going to be a mystery. We know what and I think that they're in a pretty good shape with that. So I would say the bulk of that cap space is saved for the budding youth of their roster that's right now on rookie deals still. And you can guess who those guys are for sure.
I mean, if Cameron Sutton and CJ ball out next year, why would you lose them?
Right. And that's the conversation that you have to, it's like that's the weight that you sort of like juggle, because I would argue that CJ would be a guy that I would try to lock up, and I would try to take some of that money, and then that's something you have to think about. But I think the bulk of that money, not all of it, and I would say that what I think I've seen them do is sort of save like 70% of their cap space for that, and then play with the other 30. And if they want to take the other 30 and throw all of it at one person, who's to say they can't do that? And I think that might be something you see in the future.
The last time we spoke to you, sorry. Go on, Steve.
I was going to say to Nick, I just looked up what Carlos said about CJ.
He wasn't impressed.
I'm going to put this in the damned by faint praise category. He said that CJ Gardner-Johnson was the most noteworthy of many ho-hum one-year deals.
Oh, man.
What a ringing endorsement that is.
The most noteworthy. Well, hey, that's true, I guess. Not ho-hum. I like that. That's one of the best signings in the league.
Yeah, we like CJ a lot. We like CJ a lot. I think we...
Yes. Yeah, so the last time we spoke with you had Chris Burke beside you, who I know is still kind of, but he's gone to the draft on the Athletic. But you've brought in Colton, and the podcast is still going great, and the articles are still fantastic on the Athletic. You had an article dropped today, I think earlier today, and you've obviously had loads come out, and probably quite a few more to come still. So why don't you tell us what's coming up?
Yeah, we actually did our mock draft mailbag today. Colton and I went through and we asked for people. I think we got like 70 or 80 responses where we had fans do maybe more than that mock drafts, and then we picked like 10 of them and we broke them all down. Colton also wrote a story this week on Okuda, which I thought was pretty good, and we talked about that on the podcast this week as well. The other thing I have tomorrow, actually on Friday, I have a 3-round mock draft league wide coming out tomorrow as well. So lots of busy stuff on the horizon for us at The Athletic, as always, though.
Fantastic. And don't forget to follow Nick at Nick Baumgardner on Twitter. But Nick, thank you so much for coming on again. It's amazing.
You bet, guys, anytime.
The live chat explodes every time you're on. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Your podcast gets me home from work every week.
Love it. Awesome. Glad to do it and glad to help. Anytime.
Thanks for coming, Nick.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Nick.
Bye.
You bet. Anytime. Cheers.
All right, folks, like last week, we didn't get through all the questions. So, Steve, if you have 10 minutes.
Quick fire, let's go. Or even any new questions.
So let's do Ash's question.
And what a great guy Nick is.
Yeah, I mean, just the most friendly. And as I said at the start, several people said, I love the way he talks because it's just easy to digest. I don't know if it's in his cadence or what, but it's just easy.
Yeah, and him and actually, so when they do one of these years podcasts, him and Colton going back and forth, they go super in depth, but it's very accessible. And there's always some good draft chat. So it's great to hear those guys' perspectives on things.
Absolutely. Yes, if you want to ask some more questions of us while we're still here, then please do that. And there's always the super chat option if you feel so inclined. And there's still the giveaway running, so go ahead and do that now in the description below. Our own Ash asked, and I didn't quite get there, if the Lions somehow draft Will Anderson, how would you change the defensive front to accommodate both Anderson and Hutchinson? Because ideally, they both play the same position.
Yeah, I mean, but I think it's all about rotation and mixing it up. And, with that option, you kind of want to give, offensive coordinators nightmares before they come to Ford Field. because you want to be thinking, how can I scheme James Houston in? What we're going to do with Pascal. What pressure can we bring up the middle with Aleem? So I just think that it just adds to the Arsenal, and you want to be in a position where they just don't know what's going to hit them.
For me, if they never played together as much as possible, and you had them on the field 70% of the time, which is probably about an average amount for an edge rusher. Hutchinson having like 90% of the snaps last year isn't tenable. If they do 70% of the snaps each, and the 30% they have doesn't cross over, they'll be on the same field 50% of the time. Well, 50% of the time, then they're not on the field together. Obviously, it's not going to work like that, and you kind of want them on the field together if you can. But the great thing about Hutchinson and Anderson is their run ability, stop the run ability, is almost as good, if not better, than their pass rush ability. So you can play either one at the closed end on a rotating basis. And okay, maybe that's not the best position for them, but it opens up the other guy. And if they can block that up against the run and not give anything away, well, then they're doing their job from that position and what it's meant to do, with great pass rush upside from that position too. So I just don't think it's a problem. Rotate them between the closed end and the rush end, and just laugh as you rack up the TFLs and the sacks. So it doesn't bother me.
I mean, I just can't see Anderson being there at 6. I just can't see that happening.
But I mean, somehow draft him, I think, probably includes trading up to 3 for him.
Yeah, I think the only way he's still going to be there at 6 is if the Cardinals or the Seahawks ship their pick. And I don't know. It just doesn't seem possible, and I'm not sure. Like, with the position that we're in with the draft capital, I can't get my head around investing it in an edge when I just think we've already got lots of options. And I'm still worried about the secondary. I'm still worried about Levi, and I still think that an extra offensive weapon would be fantastic. So for me, it just doesn't add up. But yeah, I would absolutely snap him up an instant at 6 if he fell.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thanks to Craig Machine77 on Twitch, who subscribed with Prime. That's his 2nd month in a row. Appreciate you. That's fantastic stuff. And
recording stopped.
I remember that I had not stopped that, which is not great. Man Bear Pig is in the building saying, hey, how are you all doing? How you doing, MBP? Mike the Marine also asked another question, which I didn't get to, but I thought it wasn't as important as the round 4 question, which was, if the Lions don't draft a quarterback high, they wait until later, and obviously they need one, why not select 2, maybe in the 5th and 6th rounds, to compete with Sudfeld? Hopefully one is mobile enough to help defend, or to help the defense to defend against. So, I mean, maybe you go and get a guy who can back up Goff in a similar system, and then like a kind of mobile guy that you can prep against.
I mean, there should be a couple of QBs that are undrafted free agents. I mean, there normally are. So is that an option as well?
Sorry, say again.
Is there an option that there's going to be someone around as an undrafted free agent?
Yeah, I very much think a mobile guy will be available down there for sure. I mean, Stetson Bennett might not get drafted. He might. I think he will, but I think there's a chance that he doesn't. I mean, at the moment in the consensus board, he's in like the 300 territory. So I don't, quarterbacks always rise a little bit. So I think he'll get drafted.
I think someone will draft it. Yeah.
But Max Duggan might not. I really think there's a strong chance that Duggan doesn't get drafted. I would take Bennett over Duggan in terms of processing and arm talent. So.
I mean, I have to say that the backup QB market in terms of veterans is looking like our supermarket shelves after Brexit at the moment.
Pretty empty.
It's barren out there, barren world.
When we were talking about Adabare just then, I was kind of thinking, but we already have Charles Harris. I didn't say it because I thought it'd be glib, but another person based just on athleticism who gets drafted at the edge position and doesn't then get production in his first 4 years in the league. It just seems so similar to me. Cool Down Rat says, agree with Steve, good D room already compared to the DT room. Problem with the DT room and the DTs available in the draft is you do not have, in my opinion, apart from Carter an elite defensive tackle in the class. You have people with potential, but Cansey has got potential to fill, and he's got a lot of holes to make up for before he can start. So I don't think there's anyone else.
Would you take Cansey to 18?
No.
Really?
No. 100% not. Out on him in the first round altogether. He's not a first round talent. He's got such a special skill set as a pass rusher, but if you pick him, teams will target him in the run game. And you know how a run game's been. Like, we can't afford to have someone who's not going to hold up against NFL caliber offensive lines. And I just don't think he has the power to do that. You could put him at the edge.
Do you think his run plays that bad? Do you think his run defense is that bad?
Yeah, I do. I don't think he's particularly strong there. His pass rush is exceptional, but he's not a good run defender. And even the people highest on him would probably admit there's room for growth there. And I think that would be just kind of, I would go one step further and say he'd be a liability day one against the run.
Would you trade a third for Ed Oliver if he was available?
Yes. I'd probably trade 18.
Ooh. Okay.
What would you not trade a second? Were you pitching a third because that's where you'd go for Ed Oliver?
I mean, the thing that keeps coming back to me is, which a lot of people have pointed out, is he's. If you look at the Buffalo defense, he's not been as productive as everyone expected. And that Buffalo D is pretty damn good. I do.
Yeah, it is.
But I like him as a player.
I like him as a player, and I do think. Yes, you get the rookie contract, which is always the thing to think about here. But if you think about the production you'll get at 18 versus his production, his is probably higher. It's definitely higher than the average player you're taking at that position. You can always get lucky on a pick, but
yeah, like his ceiling is low end is higher. If that makes sense.
His worst case scenario, his floor is higher than most people's average.
That's what I was very clumsily trying to say.
Brent just said, what would you trade for Simmons? Pick swap 7th to 6th. He has 1 year left, and he's not getting re-signed by Arizona. He'll be available on a free in a year.
Is this Isaiah Simmons?
Oh, hang on. No, sorry. No, the other Simmons. I think it's spelled differently. Maybe it's not. Who's the other DT? We've been talking about trading for him for ages. The problem with having two guys named Simmons that you're linked for in trades is it's a Tennessee guy, isn't it? Simmons.
Yeah, I try not to think about the Cardinals roster too much.
Titans Simmons. Jeffrey Simmons.
Jeffrey Simmons.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm not that high on him. I wouldn't trade a first or second for him.
So the reason why people were low on him was like personality based, I think, coming out. And I think that he's proven people wrong. But I haven't... It sounds bad. It sounds glib. I haven't really taken a lot of notice of him, to be quite frank.
My view on Cansey is if we've used 6 for like a corner, if we've got like Weatherspoon as a corner, and Bijan is off the board, I would take Cansey at 18.
I wouldn't take Cansey until 48. 40. What's our pick in the 40s?
43.
Oh Jesus, we should do better than this. Man.
I think it's 43.
That doesn't sound right. Let's have a look. Can we find out? No, because those don't list the numbers. 48. I was right. Thank you. I would take Cansey at 48. I think the upside is there.
He's never going to be there at 48.
No, but he was projected in the early hundreds 2 months ago. Like, the guy's had a meteoric rise. And I think beyond where his draft value is, like, he does things that defensive tackles should not be able to do in the pass rush game. Like, I'm not saying there isn't talent there. There clearly is. He's terrific. He does an amazing cross chop. He has a wicked swim. Like, the pass rush upside is massive. But as a defensive tackle, first and foremost, you have to hold up against the run. He's giving up 30 to 50 pounds on every single defensive tackle in the league. and he already wasn't great against the run at Pitt. Like, it's not projecting well for me. He like
where is he on most people's consensus boards? Like round about like 20, 25?
So I need to update the consensus board now because the Draft Network have updated their stuff. But he's 45 at the moment on what I have.
I'm saying he's going to go in the top 25. I'm pretty confident of that.
I'm pretty confident of it as well. I just wouldn't do it personally. Like, you know that I'm not exactly high on Brazil, but I would take Brazil over him.
Nah, no chance. I'm not having that.
Why?
Just personal preference. I just think Kansas got a higher ceiling.
Fair enough. All right. Let's see. Fan Man says, "What's Nick's favorite event on the off-season calendar?" Well, we don't know that now. Sorry, man, we didn't get there. I mean, if you don't say draft, what are you doing? I guess. What else is there?
I quite like the schedule release.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What is there happening? We know who we're playing.
I just think it becomes real then when you know the dates and you got them in the calendar. Love it.
How do you feel about the Lions not getting the Germany game by the looks of it?
Yeah, I mean, like I would have really tried hard to get tickets for that if we were playing the Chiefs in Germany. I'd have been absolutely all over that. So, but I understand for the fan base, it feels like a wasted game for them. I think it would like Chiefs against the Lions in Germany. I think would have been absolutely stellar, like atmosphere.
Yeah, I agree. Brent DeWitt asks, last question. This is
and who wants to see the Bears as well? Who wants to see the freaking Bears?
I mean, you say that, but Justin Fields is an exciting guy to watch.
Meh.
Well, you say that, but like, okay, you could have Arizona. You could have who's a really boring team. You could have Tennessee. You could have.
There's 10 quarterbacks I'd rather watch than Justin Fields.
So he's the 11th most exciting guy to watch with quarterback.
For me.
That's pretty good. That's all right. For me, there's nothing more exciting to watch than a running quarterback who's really good at it. Like, it just... When you're playing that team, I'm always on the edge of my seat because at any given point, 70-yard quarterback run for a touchdown is on the cards, and he did it several times. Like, he's never out of it, and that is fun to me. Cool Down Rat said Cansey was one of two players Riz wouldn't touch. Said Pitt gave him a free roll and just not big enough for DT. And actually, that was on the last DLP, I think, where he said Pittsburgh literally said to him, "You go be you, and we'll cover behind you if we have to," which is not a good thing as something to come out publicly. Yeah. Greg Reinhardt says, if we can't play KC in Germany, we'll have to play them in the Super Bowl, which I am backing.
Good point.
Good point. Yeah, last question we have here, but if you guys want to ask any more, then get them in now. Cool Down Rat, in fact, with a new one, says, are the Lions on schedule for a Europe game in 2024 then? As far as I understand it, the Lions can play in London on even years up until 2028. So 2024, 2026, 2028, because that's the NFC's time to play in the international window. It does appear likely that we'll go to Germany because of the Amon-Ra connection. Or like more likely than otherwise because we're having, is it 2 games in Germany next year and 3 in England, or 2 in Germany, 2 in England? So we'll see. NFL last 3 teams to play in Europe: Detroit, Dallas, and Pittsburgh. Says Mike the Marine, which I don't understand. I don't understand what you're saying, Mike, because Detroit has played in Europe twice. Anyway, Brent DeWitt had the last question, which was, when and who does Nick think the Lions will address the backup right guard or offensive line in the draft?
I can see us taking an O-line player on day 2.
Position, guard or tackle?
I would say guard.
So I think the only guard that will be available in the day 2 range that's kind of worth that sort of amount is Osiris Torrance, but he might go in the first. Beyond that, I don't think you have anyone until early day 3 at the moment. Tackle, I think there's a lot more prospects, and it depends who you class as what, right? Because Cody March or March or whatever his name, like he's listed as a tackle, but he's maybe a guard, and you can play Skoronsky at guard, and you can play a few of these other guys at guard. Darnell Wright, you can kick inside, and he'll be available, maybe, but he might be a round 1 guy.
What do you think about the Syracuse guy? Is it Bergeron?
Bergeron. I've taken him in a lot of mocks without really having watched him myself. A lot of my knowledge is just secondhand on him, that his upside is very high. So, yeah, I'm feeling it. I don't feel like a round 2 guard is on the table. Mainly because I know that they got Big V to basically reduce the contract by a year and take a pay cut, and they got Glasgow on a 1-year deal. But out of the 2 of them, as long as one of them plays well, I'm expecting one of them to come back. I'm not sure that a guard is as pressing need as a backup tackle. Like, I think you can find backup guards later or even undrafted and they'll do a job. But backup tackle, you can't scrimp at. So I would favour tackle in round 2. I think everything's in play in day 3. But there's some guys I like in that sort of range.
Would you take a tackle at 18 if, say, like Darnell Wright was on the board?
No, I don't think so. I think the opportunity cost there is so high. Because at 18, and I know that the Pride of Detroit guys have kind of tried to sell the idea that none of the first round guys have to be instant contributors because the team is actually good enough right now that you can say, rookie guys don't always contribute and they can kind of be bedded in a little bit, and we're kind of at that point where that could be a reality. And I'm like, well, yeah, but we've managed to force it so far with great success, so why don't we just keep trying to expect so that they will be day 1 starters who are high performers, and if that doesn't work, then give them a bit of time to get there. Like, I don't think we should be aiming necessarily for projects in round 1 or people who aren't going to start because we have started in those positions who aren't going to be unseated. Like, even if we took tackle 1, they ain't playing in a perfect world. In a perfect world, they don't see a snap.
Yeah, and I think that's, for me, I would take a backup tackle at 55. I think that's where the value is.
Yeah, I think so too. Brent has just been surprised that I've said that Osiris could go in round 1. On the consensus boards, he is at 31, which would list him last pick in the first round. So possibly, don't know. I mean, he's not athletically gifted, but he is technically sound, and some people will like that and some people won't. So I do wonder what's going to happen there, whether he's going to get there or not. Dan Pask has said, yes, to Darnell Wright, he's multiple too. He is absolutely multiple, so he could kick inside. But, like, I don't get the point of committing to Big V for a year, because what they did, instead of cutting him now, is they said, we are committing to you for a year. We've given you more guaranteed money than you had, but we then get out the deal for less later. And then with Glasgow, they gave him money now. So it's like, that speaks to me as if we're going to take a backup guy at guard who's going to succeed these guys, not to replace them, because otherwise, why are you paying them at all? The reading the tea leaves, it speaks to projects at guard.
And so that could be like at 81 in round 3.
Or later. I mean, I think there's day 3 guys at guard that could be good players later on. Just having a look now through the list. Antonio Maffei, I am a fan of. There was a guy that we brought in for a top 30 visit, I think, from Eastern Michigan called Sidi Sow. Or City So, and he's meant to be quite good. Juice Scruggs, I think we also brought in as well. He is the guard from Penn State. And then there's a guy who used to be really high, who's dropped a long way, who might be salvageable, and Emil Ekior. You've got Andrew Voorhees, who was a third-round pick in that sort of range until he did his ACL. It was 2 months ago or 6 weeks ago. He did his ACL, was probably out for the season. But he might now be available in the 6th. And then he comes back and starts in year 2. Like, that might be perfect for he's in the 6th or 5th. Because, okay, fine, he's not playing, but we don't need him to play. That's kind of part of the point. Tackles in that sort of range. Bergeron is probably the one that I'm highest on through second-hand knowledge, given where he might go. So he's listed at 65th. I just think that's going to be good value for someone that I've seen projected sometimes in the late first. Every now and again, he'll get a mock at like 31, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Blake Freeland's meant to be quite good out of BYU. Braden Daniels out of Utah, he's at 142. Anyone else that I've seen before? I think that's about it, but there's so many of them. Out of the 800 players or 850 players on the board, there's 66 tackles. So there's a lot to go around.
Yeah.
Dan Pask says, what happens next year on O-line, Matt? Who are our guards? I mean, re-signing Jonah is a priority.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jonah's a priority, and then I would wager that Glasgow comes back, because he's here 1 year, $4 million. And I would be willing to wager that he will take that sort of deal for the rest of his career. So as long as he's playing at an average or just above average starter level, I think the Lions will run with that. Like, I don't think enough is being made of the fact that, like, if you invest this much in your O-line, if you have paid all 5 guys, that hurts the team overall.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have as much resources to put in the other premium positions. Like, O-line is great. It ain't a skill position. Like, wide
You've
receivers,
got to have at least one, maybe 2
ends.
rookies on there.
Like, defensive end next year is an interesting one. Because Romeo's gone. As much as I love him, don't see him coming back. He'll probably want to get paid elsewhere, especially if he has a good season. Charles Harris will be gone. That leaves us with 4, unless we draft someone this year. But even then, it's like, okay, but what if Pascal doesn't take a step? And actually, maybe he's a tweener and he could kick inside. And Kamish is a tweener and maybe he can kick inside. Well, that leaves you with 2 pure edges. And one of them's Houston, who has had 100 career snaps. Like, the edge position seems strong for this year. We are 6 deep legitimately. But next year, it might be 1 if we have a bad year. So I don't really want to draft edge, but I would draft edge in day 3 for sure. There's so many good ones, like so many good high upside guys in day 3 this year at the edge position.
Do you think on day 1 we'll go defense?
No.
What do you think?
The more I think about it, the more I think the first pick is quarterback.
Oh, hello.
Yeah.
This is going to be an interesting podcast on Monday.
Well, I'm maybe reading too much into the villain jersey, but I think that Brad Holmes has no problem being it. And I don't know, but if they fall in love with a guy in the draft just as much as I have, I can see them trading up for a guy. That's what I'm saying.
Why don't you tell the listeners who your big crush is, man?
Oh, they know who it is. They know who it is. I'm a big A-Rich guy. Anthony Richardson's the only guy who can be Patrick Mahomes or better in the draft at the QB position. And I don't think it will take him that long to get there. I really don't. Maybe 18 months, and he could be at that sort of level. Still making mistakes, still a young guy. Like, I'm not saying that he's going to be absolutely perfect, but he's got the tools and he's got the brain. He just needs the muscle memory.
He is what they call a tantalizing prospect.
Yeah, definitely. Dan says he would like to spend a first or second rounder on O-line. What else do we have? Jameson Hennessy says a great O-line makes the whole team better. That's true. So does a great D-line. And what needs more improvement? But also, like, having a great D-line doesn't mean paying all 5 guys. And in fact, if you do pay all 5 guys, does that mean the depth is worse? Because you can't afford it. Like, the whole point about the salary cap is that it is a balancing act. And we could shove all our chips in the middle and say we're getting the most loaded roster possible. But that makes this window very temporary.
I don't think we've mentioned at any point on the podcast tonight tight ends.
No, still on the Darnell Washington train. Will not get off it ever.
So again, my question is, where are you going to take him? Because is 18 too high?
18's not too high for me, but I think he'll be available at 48.
Really? I can't see him being there at 48. I really can't.
Well, I think that in a world where the majority of NFL teams value pass catching from tight ends over blocking ability, that you will see the other 4 tight ends out of the 5 rise above him. I think he'll be tight end 5 when it comes to being picked.
So with Kincaid and Mayer both above him, and also Luke, is it Luke?
No, I wouldn't put Schoonmaker above him. Tight ends are Musgrave, Mayer, Kincaid, and Kraft.
Yeah, so I think Kincaid is projecting like 1. And I've seen him mocked. Where have I seen him mocked a lot to? Green Bay.
Yeah, Kincaid to Green Bay has been a thing, but Mayer to Green Bay has been a thing, and Musgrave to Green Bay has been a thing. They've been linked with them all. On the consensus board at the moment, we have Mayer at 22, Musgrave at 33, Washington at 37, Kincaid at 38, and Kraft at 59. But I think Kraft is undervalued at 59. And you've also got Sam Laporta at 74. So you've got 6 tight ends in the top 74 picks. Like,
yeah,
I think that's going to bring the whole class down. Like, oh, if you don't get Kincaid, you can get a Musgrave. If you don't get a Kraft, you can get a Mayer, or vice versa. Like, Washington is the unique guy out of the group. And that doesn't mean some teams will like him more than others, but the majority of teams all like the other type of tight ends. So
I've seen Mayer and Kincaid mocked to the Commanders a lot, but they've got is it Logan Thomas, who I think is pretty decent?
Yeah, I love the former Lion Logan Thomas, for sure. But I've seen them talk about. So he had a few really good years where he kind of solidified himself as a starting caliber tight end, and then he's had a couple of like injury prone years. So I think this is make or break for him this year in Washington, to be honest. And if he breaks, then he could find himself back at the Lions as a reclamation project. So, what else? Got one more. Dat Fan Man. If we draft a first round tight end, second chance, but the new mystery tight end gem in the draft is Brenton Strange from Penn State. In this deep tight end class, is the hype real, or is it just strange? Great wordplay. Love it. Where is Strange? Brenton Strange, 229. He's no cunts, I'll tell you that. I have no idea who Brenton Strange is.
What can I say?
Are you embarrassed?
I've already got 1,000,001 article titles with puns on Jordan Love, so a Strange would really add to my repertoire.
I mean, I just really want us to transition Zach from Old Dominion to like defensive end and have him sack Jordan Love in a game-winning event, and the highlight, the headline could be something like "Cunts ruins Love" or something like that.
The day that the Packers cut Jordan Love, then I will write an article for the Royal Lions blog that will be entitled "Love Don't Live Here Anymore."
Yeah, love it. Giovanni Lyons says, "You missed mine. Is it unrealistic?" I'm going to scroll. He says, is it possible to move back into the first? Is it possible to move back in the first and then move back into the first and pick up Bijan, Brazil, Campbell? I mean, you'll definitely be able to pick up Brzee and Campbell in the first for me because they're not first round caliber players. So if you want to go and get them, then you can absolutely do that. Bijan. So I guess you're talking about trading back from 6 to above 10 because I think he'll go to Philly otherwise. But I don't know. Yeah, I think it's possible to do that, but I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, we could turn picks 48 and is it 48 and 53?
48 and 55.
48 and 55. We could turn those into a first round pick, I would have thought.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, they'd be worth, I don't know,
25 or something?
Yeah, something like that. That sounds about right, intrinsically. We don't have any other questions, so is there anything else you want to just chat about before we go?
Hendon Hooker.
Yeah.
Well, so if Hooker was there at 48 or 55, would you be tempted to take him? Bearing in mind that if Goff goes down, it's Nate Sudfeld time.
I mean, I don't think it's one or the other, is it? Surely you can take someone who isn't one of those two later on.
Yeah, but I mean, Hooker is someone who, we've seen how good he was pre-injury. Like, I don't buy this thing about like his age. He's only 25. Like, if he's, he could play for 12 years at the top level if, he's over his injury. So, but he could be the future, like in terms of his ceiling, certainly. And that also means that we don't have to spend the 6th or the 18th. So do you think Hendon Hooker is an option?
He's definitely an option, and I would think about it for a bit, but I'm not. I love him as a prospect, but I don't love him for us. I was listening to the Pride of Detroit POD cast, and they were saying, was it Pride of Detroit, in fact?
No,
I can't remember.
Listen to the last one. I don't think it was. I don't.
Okay, who was it I was listening to?
Maybe the DLP.
Yes, it was. It was Chris on the DLP yesterday, and he said, "You draft Hooker, and if Goff goes down, the offense doesn't change. Hooker comes in, can operate that offense." Fundamentally disagree with that take. Like, they're not similar quarterbacks. Hooker...
There are similarities.
So, Goff is a spread offense guy in college, but we play majority with 3 wide receivers now, not 4, as he did in Cal. And his offense is a timing-based rhythm offense, whereas Hooker is a deep spread offense, no reading the field, which Goff does very well. And he has one read and then throws to one of 2 different people. And the one read he has is, can I get the guy deep? And maybe that should be a fundamental part of a lot of QBs, but it's not.
Hooker doesn't throw a lot of picks. So he's obviously got field awareness.
But if you have a look at their offense, it doesn't exist in the NFL. And so when he say he doesn't throw a lot of picks, well, he's not throwing a lot of routes that can get picked easily. So,
but he's a ball of clay at this point in his career.
So my argument on the age thing isn't how long you have him for. It's what habits has he learned by the age he is. So at 21 years old, he hasn't had very long in a college system to learn bad habits. And also young guys tend to learn the most quickly. It's not that you can't get there at 25, but it might take you longer than a 21-year-old. Because, I mean, maybe there's a maturity factor too, but you can just find mature 21-year-olds. And in fact, I think a lot of successful prospects are probably quite mature because that's how they got there. Working hard. Like, I think there's an abundance of people like that. So I don't think maturity is a massive issue unless it wanted to be. But at 25 years old, you have to unteach him a lot as well as teach him a lot. Like, he has to learn to read the field. That's no mean feat. And I mean, to get the best out of Hendon Hooker, you need to make sure that he's using his rushing threat well. And he doesn't protect himself particularly well, so he's always going to be an injury risk. Think someone who runs a bit like Lamar, but not quite as fast and not quite as good at protecting himself. Like, that's what you're getting in Hendon Hooker on the upside. And he's a terrific runner. Like, you would want to use that weapon. That's one of the reasons why you take him. But that means changing the offense in quite a big way. Like, Hendon Hooker would be a great scout quarterback for Baltimore if you were playing Baltimore with Lamar Jackson or Arizona with Kyler Murray. Like, that sort of rushing threat is rare. And so you would want to use that. And then the deep ball threat, okay, fine. We've got one guy who would be able to match up with that in Jameson Williams. But other than that...
That's still quite a combo.
It was quite a combo. And, he only had Jalen Hyatt that could do that. But
Marvin Jones to a certain extent.
But, I mean, you're talking about maybe 0.3 of a second difference in the 40 between those two people. Like, Jalen Hyatt is rapid. And that's who you had on the outside. So, I don't know. I wouldn't take him.
I mean, I guess we spoke to Nick about this, was that my problem is I think we're going to be picking between 20 and 25 next year. And if that's true, it's going to be a massive reach to get, say, a Caleb Williams.
So I would say draft a quarterback this cycle or trade down with getting a first next year, no matter how much that costs you, to put yourself in position next time and just trust yourself to draft well. I don't know if you've seen the top 10 big boards that have been posted in our Discord in the last few days about like 2014's top 15 or 2016's top 10 or whatever it is. And like 7 out of 10 of them are bad. Like 8 out of 10 of the top 10 had bad careers. And maybe we've gotten better at drafting over the years, we, the collective NFL GMs. But I don't think so. So actually, is it so important that you draft in the top 10, or is it get value where you can? So if you get an insane offer to move down, take it, say you're going next year, or take a guy this year, or don't take anyone at all and say Goff is your guy. But make a definite decision one way or the other. Draft a successor, trade down to get one next year, or at least put yourself in position to do so. If you don't do either of those things, you're not putting yourself in purgatory, because we're going to re-sign Jared Goff in 12 months' time. And we'll get 1 year's worth of cheap Jared Goff again, because you re-sign him, which means low salary, spread of the signing bonus. So you'll get him at a cap hit of like $15 million for a year. And then in 2024, you've got cheap Jared Goff. And then after that, you wait and see what happens. But Goff, if he played the way he did for the second half of last year, is fine. More than fine. Top 5 offense, top 10 quarterback play.
You could still well have, like, the Raiders, the Titans, Washington. They could all still be looking for a QB next year, and they'll all probably be drafting higher than us. This is my thing. Like, I don't think we're going to get another pick as high, possibly for the next 2 seasons.
Okay, so here's what I could say to you. There's been a lot of smoke about Houston taking a edge at 2 and then trading up from 12 to get a QB, possibly with Detroit. Okay, well, if Houston want to go from 12 to 6, okay, fine. We'll chuck in a 3rd in this draft as well, because we've got 2 of them. And we want Houston's first next year.
I mean, I've also heard that Houston takes Stroud at 2 and then use their 12th pick, or maybe trade up for JSN. I
would love JSN in their offense. I think that'd be terrific. There's lots of stuff you hear and don't hear. What I'm saying is, if you get the opportunity to get a first in next year's draft with someone, then you have 20 to 25, hopefully, with what you've just said we'll have, but maybe you have 10 as well. And 10 and 25... and a 2025 first and a 2024 6th might get you number 1 overall. And you've given up 1 future first and a late round pick to do it compared to what you have right now. So I just don't think it's insurmountable. The whole point is make a decision today about what your strategy is. And Holmes is the best at that. He knows what he's doing pretty much all the time. He has a timeline for these things. The worst thing you can do, I think, is let the draft fall to you and don't take a quarterback. And then we're in purgatory the year afterwards, but you haven't committed to Goff. Do one of the three options. Don't do none of them. Because I think you'd be in a good place whatever you do. If you draft a QB of the future, it's a gamble. But at least you're taking a direction. You get a cheap quarterback for 3 years after the first year that you have him because you've still got Goff in the books. And then a fifth-year option. So 4 cheap years of a quarterback. If you go with Goff, you get 1 cheap year when you re-sign him. And if you go for next year, you get value in a trade down, and then you start the QB clock again. Like, there's merits to all 3 of those situations. But doing none of them by being passive is the worst of all worlds. Because, yeah, you get some good players, but what happens then when Goff has you over a barrel saying, I want more money now, and you don't have another option? Like you say, other teams will want quarterbacks. So you've got to choose what you want. But as long as they do that, it's fine.
Yeah.
What would you do, incidentally? Would you just take Hooker and say one of you 2 guys will be the future?
I'm just like, I love the thought of Richardson. And I love the thought of taking Richardson at, say, 6 and sitting in behind Goff for like a season and a half. Because I think Richardson's ceiling is so high and he just could be that difference maker. But also, like, I'm just so scared of like fucking up all the good work that we've done with the roster by overreaching and ending up with, a Trey Lance type. We just don't know what he is. So
yeah, but then I mean, San Francisco is still competing. Like even then, I would say scared teams don't win championships. Sometimes, be shrewd, but sometimes be bold.
So I would go defense this year, or defense and then Bijan at 18 if he's still there. And if Bijan's gone at 18, I'd go defense. I'd go corner. I'd go corner and then DT, or DT then corner, depending on. So if Carter's there at 6, I'd take Carter and then the best corner at 18. Probably, like, I think Witherspoon would be gone, but maybe Banks. And if Carter's gone, I would take Witherspoon at 6 and then Kancey at 18.
I still think Branch is in play as well. I really like Branch. I know that he seems a bit redundant with Gardner Johnson, but I don't think you can have too many of those guys. And I think you can get both on the field if you really wanted to. But also, if you don't want to pay Gardner Johnson, you got a ready-made replacement. And I mean, if you want to move on from Tracy, he's got 2 years left on his deal now. I think it was a 3-year deal we signed him to. 3 years, 40.
I'd be amazed if CJ wasn't around in 2024.
Really?
I'd be amazed.
Wow. I mean, you know that his agent's going to play hardball next year if he plays well, though. You've got previous on this now, so you're going to have to be prepared to pay him if he does well.
Yeah, we'll have the cap space.
We've got a lot of people to pay. Thanks to James Brown for subscribing on YouTube, and if you've enjoyed this video, please make sure that you do go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the like and the bell and all of that stuff, because you know how much it helps out us small streamers. And also don't forget to follow us on Twitch, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter as well. You can find the links for those down below. And in fact, while you're there, why don't you enter the competition while you're doing it, because it's free to do so. All of those things you have to do to actually enter the competition in the first place, those give you entries. It's ending 7 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. So get in now, and if you win, you get a choice of some great Lions merch. You can see them all at the link down below. Website, ROTLUK.com. Rate us 5 stars on your podcast provider. Give us a review. We'd love to hear what you think. There's also a Google form down below if you want to give us some more detailed feedback. Otherwise, Steve, anything you want to sign off with?
I'm really looking forward to our mock draft podcast on Monday.
That's what we're doing on Monday. Yeah, Lions 7-round mock draft. We just reveal pick by pick who we've picked. The week afterwards, we do a consensus first round mock draft, I think, or we all pick our own and then maybe we do a consensus one. I don't know. We'll make it fun. College Pod yesterday did dynasty rankings for rookie for drafts for Dynasty, I don't know, whatever. I don't really understand it that well. But the drafts for those happen before the draft. So that is coming in a couple of weeks' time. So if you want to know perhaps who to draft in your fantasy team, go and check that out from yesterday. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you've really enjoyed it. Nick, fantastic guest as always. Hoping that we're going to get some more really exciting guests in the lead up to the draft. Our draft show. Didn't mention the draft show. 3 weeks today it starts. We'll be going on the air in about 2 hours' time, in 3 weeks' time. 29 different guests.
Oh, yeah.
29 different guests so far booked. More hoping to get booked. Over 20 hours of live streaming. I'm hoping to get some really nifty graphics to make it look a bit more professional. We're trying to pull out all the stops here. It's going to be the most fun way to watch the NFL draft if you're not doing it with a party with some of your friends or anything like that. And you can come and join us. More details on that later.
I want you to name and shame. So we've got 29 guests.
Oh, you're going to make me do it.
What two teams can we not find a guest for? What two wretched, miserable, loveless teams are not going to be represented so far?
I mean, I'm still trying to get them represented, so I don't want to throw too much shit at them.
Come on, spill, name names.
I'm loading the page. I'm loading the page. Give me a second. It is. So we haven't had a confirmation from him, but we've had him on the show twice recently. Carolina Panthers and Dave. So he'll be on. So there's only one, and that is someone that we've had on the show before for the draft in the last 2 years. The Kansas City Chiefs and Neil, who's really nice, fun guy. Messaged him twice, just haven't had a reply yet. I'll keep going for him. But if we get him, we've got all 31. So
even found someone to come on who's willing to represent the Green Bay Packers.
Well, yeah. So we've had Steve say he'll come on, but he's let me down twice in a row now. So this is it. If Steve Diddy doesn't come on, we might have to sever ties. If you're a Packers
fan, would you come on a Detroit Lions podcast at the moment? You'd have to be a brave man.
Oh, come on. He wouldn't let us get a word in edgeways. You know it. He'd be right up in our faces telling us that love is the second coming. Absolutely. All you need is love. I would do anything for love, but I won't do that.
We'll have to get the Tom Grossi clip from last year and replay that before the draft.
That or the clip of the Pat McAfee show when they drafted Love.
Yeah.
That was legit. Det Fan Man said, just call up Grossi. Yeah, we're friends. I mean, he did actually come on the show. Not come on the show. He raided the channel, didn't he? So that was something.
Good shout, mate. Matt's going to reach out.
Oh, yeah. There's no chance. He's too big for us. Although he's a super humble guy.
That was too big for all the Lions.
Right, folks. Thank you for sticking with us all this time. We'll see you on Monday for the mock draft show. Goodbye.
FTP.